All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 58 of the PoddyC. Up first, we have some Race to World First news.
Wait,
Liquid
what?
Guild trading. I'm fired up for two class Discord mods and a first round draft pick. How's that going for you, Max? Interesting decision there.
Mm-hmm. Uh, I'm trying to think of a parallel of what the GM from the Mavericks said. We're leading off the podcast with basketball. That's crazy.
Well, we ended last week's with basketball, so
Oh, was that the starting five thing?
yeah, that was the starting five. So
Oh,
there's
perfect.
some elegance to it. Yeah.
So if you guys remember the starting five thing, there was basically like the craziest trade, I think, in like North American sports history, where they traded, as Dratnos was trying to relate to you all, like this super, super crazy, insane, generational, going to be the best player in the league one day, will win multiple championships for someone who's very good, but then some other people that just like you never get traded in that scenario when you're a superstar. Very crazy. It would be like trading fired up if trading existed in WoW. There's no way to make it
Yeah.
seem normal. It just makes no sense.
Yeah, I had people in my chat asking me, "What do you think about Luka Doncic?" And then I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I have no idea what was going on. And
Sick.
That's the guy who's only seen it
yeah,
typed
Don-
out, never pronounced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Doncic. Full
Yeah.
name. He's a beast.
Mm,
Yeah, I've seen conspiracy theories that like the owners are trying to get rid of the fandom in Dallas so that they can move the team to like Vegas or somewhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with that theory, but yeah, it is definitely one of the few times I'm very like anti conspiracy in general. Like I think there's always like an easy answer to most things, and even when things could be a conspiracy, I'm just so anti conspiracy brained that I would never think of it. And in this scenario, I'm like something's happening here. There's the deep state, there's some shit going there's some shit going on.
In WoW news, we had a kind of looking forward post thing, and then alongside that, an announcement of some of the details of player housing, which I don't know how much that's going to be a common topic on this particular podcast because I don't expect you guys to be too housing pilled, but
I
it
think
seems
it's
pretty
important.
cool. They shot at Final Fantasy, which I'm sure you can relate to.
yeah, I
Max.
saw that part. It was crazy.
Love doing that.
Always a nice thing. Yeah, like within the article, there were some very thinly veiled attacks on the Final Fantasy housing system, where like if you unsub, your house gets repossessed, and there's like very limited supply of housing. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was cool.
Which you would assume you would never, like, if you were going to bring in a housing system, you would never intentionally include
Right.
those aspects where they're like hard to obtain. Like in Final Fantasy, you have to get them through a lottery system. I actually haven't read that post yet, so if there's anything cool from it that you saw that you want to like kind of go over, I'd be interested in learning about it. I mean, whether it's a topic for this podcast at all, like, is this something we would normally chop it up about for a while? Probably not, but it's so important to WoW. Like it's one of those things, it's one of the big MMO things where like WildStar had really good player housing. Final Fantasy has it. It's just one that's going to bring a lot I don't know how many new people it's going to bring into MMOs, but it's definitely going to bring other MMO players maybe back into WoW. Or if you haven't tried WoW, you might just because of the player housing. Maybe not high level type people, which is normally who we associate ourselves with. It's what we like about the game. But it's going to be good for all of our sub numbers and Twitch viewers and stuff like that for whenever this gets implemented. No question. It's setting the stage for a pretty big expansion launch because there's something naturally everyone's going to be really excited about.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things people have been asking for since I don't know 15 years ago or something like that in WoW, right? So it's definitely a high stakes project for them. But as far as like casual content, I think this is very clearly the highest bang for their buck that they could invest in there. So pretty exciting. One of the things from the post, I guess if you haven't read it, there's going to be like neighborhoods. So it's going to be sort of like the Final Fantasy system where you have an instanced neighborhood with 50 houses or whatever in it. But unlike Final Fantasy, there will either be the public ones where it sort of just creates them for you, and then you'll have a persistent set of neighbors and stuff, or you can have a private one, which is just
You and your
invite only.
friends.
So you could have you and your friends all in a neighborhood, or you and your guild all in a neighborhood, which I think for me in particular, and a lot of the people I know who have a lot of in-game friends, that's the really exciting part, right? Of like having a neighborhood with all of your guildies in the same place. On release, they're going to just have two different like locations for these. One of which is like Duratar, and one is Elwyn Forest, which makes sense. And then they're going to add more over time, and I think Obviously, the more they add, kind of the hyper it gets, because there's a lot of people who wanted to something besides just the Durotar or Elwyn Forest aesthetic for
Definitely.
where they put the house down. But I think it makes it obviously like it's kind of like the Warband campfire screen where you get the feature out there and then you start adding more to it, right? What they're doing
Yeah.
with Warband, loading screens, which is obviously a smaller deal than housing, but they're adding a bunch of like alternative ones that you can put up for that starting in this coming patch. So I imagine we'll see something similar with housing. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the big details are still yet to be revealed. I think there's a lot of ways that it could still be bad, but most of the post I think was pretty encouraging. It seems like they are really going for it, which
Yeah, it's not
I
going to
think you have to
be.
with housing, not Garrison's 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. I think they had to. If there was a reason that I felt like they put this out now, why do you put this out now? Why do you feel like you need to give a first look thing? I think for so many people, oh, there's player housing, their mind immediately goes to garrisons, right? And everything it's just gonna be this basic thing. I feel like the idea of like the neighborhoods even alone, the private or public, or just it feeling like a home so much more because of that, I feel like alone just makes it so much better. There's no way they fucking garrison this shit. That would be so.
It
That would be
so
just such a
tragic.
colossal failure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that so many times too. I've heard the whole, oh, it's just garrisons again, or nobody really cares about housing. There's just a lot of WoW players who have been kind of pessimistic on this because, they either don't play other MMOs or they don't know what to expect out of this. But
Mhm.
I mean, hearing about the whole neighborhood, that part sounds really cool. I'm just like imagining the whole idea of you log in and then you kind of just like leave your house and you see your friends on, because a lot of times I will see my friends on WoW, but I'm not gonna like necessarily message them. But like say like we have our own house, right? And I log in and I see Dratnos on, right? That sounds cool as hell. Like I'm not gonna normally message Dratnos. Dratnos knows this. I'm not gonna just gonna like I don't know where.
Well,
Message
let's set some
Dratnos.
expectations here. You and I are not going to be in the same neighborhood, buddy. But yeah, somebody
All right,
some
fine.
other
All right,
friend of
well,
yours.
okay. Well, you don't have to be
Wow.
in my neighborhood. All right, you're probably in the poor neighborhood, the one with like
What?
no microtransactions and like
Yeah,
your housing is gonna suck real bad. So I
yeah,
understand, but like maybe someone cool like
Mhm.
Tettles perhaps.
Right.
Maybe he'll be in my
Jumps
neighborhood,
top of the
and
list
I'll
when you hear
yeah
cool.
I'll see Tettles on his chicken. He's just gonna be out there. I'm gonna be like, oh shit, it's Tettles. Like, what up, Tettles? It's gonna be pretty cool.
Yeah,
However, I do worry because I didn't really worry about this before. I do wonder if it's gonna take away from the current open world of Warcraft. Like I'm
Definitely.
just imagining with neighborhoods and all that. I mean, like how many people are really gonna be around Valdraken or what is it right now? Like Kazalgar or
Dornagal.
whatever.
Yeah,
Dornagal, yeah.
yeah. I think there's definitely some risk of people, and that was one of the things they cited for only starting with the 2 zones as well, was having many housing zones conflicts with the pillar of designing a feature that's deeply social. In a world where players can live in many different zones, they become increasingly spread out, and even with aggressive sharding, the chance of seeing other players, much less interacting with them, drops quickly. So
Yeah.
they did say there's 2 available for launch with more in the future, but that does sort of put a damper on the idea of like every zone having one of these or something like that.
Yeah, and what Dorky is saying as well is, I think they've already conceded that. Like,
Mhm.
as soon as you decide to build housing, the whole like, oh, you're gonna see people less of the time in Orgrimmar and stuff. The answer to that is 100% like absolutely. This is by design doing that. In fact, it may be a reason they strayed away from it in the past. Even Diablo did this when it first came out. If anyone played Diablo 4, where you used to have to run to the nightmare dungeons rather than just like port straight there, but they eventually caved. But why was it like that initially? It's because they wanted, this is probably a mistake, they wanted Diablo 4 to feel like an MMO. They wanted you to see people out in the world instead of just in town going to places. And that mattered to them in their design. Obviously, it didn't work. They went back on it, but like these games, especially Blizzard, has like a huge, they love that like you're constantly seeing people. But that is going to, when you are not at your house, you are going to see people less. There's just no other way around that. There's just going to be less people not in their homes,
Well,
right?
I mean, if they have like say you have like 100 people per shard or whatever, and right now you have 10 shards of Dornagal spun up or whatever.
You
On
just
any
have less
given-
shards.
You just have less shards, and they could all be still equally populated as long as there's not like fully ghost zones. And I think some of the RP servers have special no sharding rules and stuff like that. But I don't think it has to feel that like I think on the margins it maybe will feel a little bit less alive, I guess, but I don't think it has to be that big a deal because there's already some sharding with those capital cities and stuff.
Have you
I don't
guys
know.
ever gone to a party or a rave in Final Fantasy at someone's house?
No, I've seen
Or are you familiar or have seen stuff like that?
yeah with the like disco ball thing and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, I've seen.
Yeah, so I don't know if WoW could as easily do that because, like, I think in Final Fantasy you can like literally plug in a MIDI source and like play shit. I don't think there's anything like that in WoW, but I wonder. Part of me wondered if there was going to be like a nightclub scene in WoW with that or something similar, and then also as a side note, like how cursed that could get.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm thinking like Goldshire Inn on Moonguard, but like there's a nightclub now and everything that would go along with that.
Yeah, I wonder
Yeah.
how immersion breaking they'll go with the whole player housing, because you know how WoW generally sticks. Well, I'm not sure how true that is nowadays, because you know with the whole uh, what is it called, the tenders?
Attendees, yeah.
Denny's.
Yeah, with the whole tendies, nowadays you have things that are not really World of Warcrafty, kind of like
Mhm.
earmuffs you can get that don't really, you know, give Warcraft vibes. So I'm just like wondering, like how true to Warcraft are we gonna stick to with the whole player housing?
Yeah, I imagine they'll probably start off pretty like there's I imagine it's mostly going to be decorations that are on theme for WoW. But I don't know. I mean, that's one of the things they haven't talked about much is all the different decorations and like how you can get them and what they all look like. They did say one of the things that makes you think it's not going to be garrisons is so one of the pillars is boundless self-expression, where they want there to be a tool set that is easy enough for someone with no 3D experience to be comfortable with and use successfully, but it should also be powerful enough that players can surprise us with their creations or drill down to get the tiniest details just right. The gamut of decor options spans not just the cultures of Azeroth, but the many expansions of World of Warcraft as well. So, I mean, you can imagine if you go to a public neighborhood, there's a good chance there'd be a bunch of clashing, like Northrend decor next to Outland decor or whatever, and it would kind of clash. But I imagine there's not going to be like StarCraft themed houses, at least right away. Although I wouldn't be shocked if they eventually did that kind of thing. They also did say there's going to be some that you can buy in the store, right? Some
Yeah, they were really explicit with the whole
yeah, it's
quote
like
unquote pay to win or whatever. Like they literally say pay to win in the
you will, yeah. Their goal is
Interesting.
for it to not be pay to win, right? But
Yeah.
It's interesting they use that verbiage though.
yeah,
Yeah.
they straight up use that word verbiage.
yeah, which I mean makes sense. I think you should definitely expect there to be some stuff in the shop for housing, obviously, but hopefully there's a huge amount of cool stuff that you can get without paying any extra. And I'm pretty sure. I mean, it feels like they did try and say that's what they're going for here. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see whether they hit that. But yeah, definitely an exciting feature, I think, for a lot of people. And I think even if you're not really a housing enjoyer, I think like if you're just an M pluser or a raider, it's still, I think, like you said, Max, like it's just going to be good for us if the game grows as a result of this. And I think the chances of the game growing as a result of housing getting dev time is probably a lot higher than like Covenant RP features or Warfronts or any of the sort of casual dev time that
It's
has been
the
spent in
highest.
those sorts of things. Yeah, like this has got
Right,
now.
like-
I think this is a bigger undertaking than any of those as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely got like even if this isn't for you at all, I think it's got the most potential to grow
dude.
the game and
Like, I mean-
and also to like capture some of the classic people into retail as well. I think this is one of
100%.
those huge kind of crossover features that will grab people that got into classic mostly.
Like there's gonna be so much, like even in our guild, like, our guild exists for a purpose that is like contrary to why they would make something like player housing, but we would have so much fun with that. If you could make a guild house, did they mention that?
I think when they first announced it, maybe. I mean, you could have a guild neighborhood, so presumably, I hope that you could have like a guild hall in the middle, and
Yeah, that would be so sick.
everybody's house around it. That would go so crazy, especially if you could like, if like a Hall of Fame achievement gives you the boss's head as a trophy that you could put in your guild hall, like that could go so crazy. Yeah. In other news, we've had a little bit more boss testing, retesting stuff going on. Not, I actually didn't do this retesting either, but I imagine it's mostly kind of small bug fixy retesting. Is that fair to say?
I think so. They felt a little bit more like, well, I mean, I guess sticks just didn't work the previous
Right.
testing, and this time it just worked. So I guess you could get a more fully formed idea on the boss. Same thing with One-Armed Bandit. I actually don't know why they retested that fight, but
My guess was the shooty coin hitbox detection of getting the buff, but I'm not sure if that was actually any better.
maybe. But I mean, that's something you could easily test internally. That's like the most easy QA thing ever. The fight just functioned exactly the same. There's some spell queuing issues that existed before and now. I just don't know why they retested it, but it did actually improve my opinion on the fight. I thought One-Armed Bandit seemed more. Maybe it's just because like we got further because it's testing and you see it again and you do better than you did last time. But like it kind of makes more sense to me. But yeah, I don't know. Same old, same old. Raid should be
And
fine.
some class tuting's been coming in as well. It seems still a little kind of all over the place, the class tuning, but I mean we're approaching this patch, we think, right? Like at this point, it's weird because we haven't seen a date yet for this patch, and it sort of seemed likely that would be something they would announce in the "Hey, here's what's coming next for WoW" thing that they did, right? But then there's just still no.
I think
release date.
historically, I think the public announcement historically is around 2 to 2.5, like 3 weeks before. So it should, if we think it's coming out when it's coming out, right? Like there's been a lot of signs pointing to like somewhere near the end of February. If that is the case, you would see an announcement within the next week, certainly, I think.
There was a string as well that got data mined that was like the season start date string, and it said March 4th for US, March 5th for...
Which would be a late February patch, right?
Right, which would be... So the patch would typically then... You would expect the patch to be the 25th of February and the season to be on the 4th of March if they keep the 1 week gap between the season and the patch, which they've had for the last while.
Also, if you're an enjoyer of like other random things that are usually telling, Towley, someone in my chat said that Towley mentioned that the patch was on the 25th, and Towley not only definitely has the connections to know that, but also has this like interesting combination of not caring about the consequences of just saying it on stream. So that's always usually right. So yeah. I would put my money on that. If that was true, I didn't even hear him say it myself. Someone in my chat could have just made that up, and now I'm regurgitating that makeup to all of you. But that could be it.
So we're expecting the 25th to be when like straight up a raid is out, right?
No. The 25th would be the... If this is right, then the 25th would be the patch, and the 4th would be like the raid and the M+ and all that.
Oh, okay.
The 25th would be like that kind of weird dead week where you can do the new zone, you can do the outdoor stuff, you can farm some seeds or something, you can get your guild banned for a couple days, those sorts of things.
You can
and
still...
then the actual...
Yeah, so there is like another rep grind this season, and part of me today was wondering, like, I wonder if any guild is going to even remotely fuck with that, and the answer has to be no.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if there's a enchanted rune crest or whatever at the end of that thing, I don't know, the temptation is gonna be there.
Yeah, but it's like everyone was recently punished, right? People act. It turns out punishments matter. Like they punished us in Emirdrasil, so there was no way we would have done it last year. We were like so against it. But if we weren't punished, we probably wouldn't have been. Method and Echo weren't punished, so they did it, got punished. So now going into this tier, everyone has been punished for specifically rep. Mm-hmm. It would blow my mind if anyone was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just do it. You're just the only logical line of thinking is like report this to Blizzard so no one else can do it. And we don't do it ourselves, and that just has to be the solution. There's a gray area and a blurry line on so many other areas, but specifically rep, that there's been a line drawn in the sand. Like you should not be doing this, right? They have said that.
Well, or here's a theory that comes from like war, which is like if there's artillery barrages coming in at you, sometimes what you're supposed to do is you go to where the last hit, because they're going to adjust the aiming, and so they're not going to hit the same place twice. So if you think about it from that perspective, maybe Blizzard's
Yeah.
they're like, okay, we banned for rep. Now we're gonna ban for something else this tier, and rep, and we'll just rely on them being scared, so they won't do the rep, and then and then you can actually get away with it, right?
Maybe.
I'm just saying.
I just think of the interaction I would have to have with them because, like, we have channels where we can communicate with them on all kinds of things like this. And I just imagine, like, the shame in, they're like, because, they're not dumb. They're like, you guys are doing this again? And I just be like, how do I respond to this? Because I've, like, met these people, Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, like, it would be hard to look them in the eye.
Yeah, for the record, it's an extremely dumb argument that I made. I mostly just want there to be drama.
Yeah.
I don't want
Classic has
a
taught us
boring
that.
race. I'm hoping to see some bans for something or other. Warranted, unwarranted. I don't really care. It's just the more drama, the more views.
That is definitely something that Classic has taught us. And you kind of saw a little bit last year, like with those bans before the raid and then like the fired up Spellslinger thing, like that definitely increased viewership and like the amount of people that were paying attention to this thing in a very toxic way. But like it did do that. But like that's all OnlyFans is. Josh Strife Hayes on Twitter said that OnlyFans is Jersey Shore for terminally online people, and that could not be more correct. So like maybe you do need to do that in the race. If we want the race to like super pop off in viewership, all we have to do is generate or manufacture some kind of fake. I mean, it's not even really fake. There's definitely like
there's beef.
The top guilds do not like each other at all. There was a tier not even too long ago where a guild won, cheated, and never got punished for it. Right? Like that's not something you just like.
Wait, which guild is that?
I'm not sure. But yeah, like like I don't know. It is real, but I guess it's just like less known publicly. There needs to be like some public like words being slung.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do my best. Me and Dorky, we're gonna try and get some clickable drama sparking things out of you. So
Okay.
We could get this started because if the predictions are right, we've got less than a month until this thing kicks off. So we need to start ramping up the drama cycle.
I mean, it's all fair game anyways. Like, exploiting is part of World of Warcraft. We've already seen this in all forms of WoW. It is extended as far as Plunderstorm. What?
Dorky, what's the lore with like holiday buffs and M+? Can you explain this? Because I've seen some posts like alluding to it. Apparently some of the top runs are done with like holiday buffs that you can get, and you get power from them, and then there's just
you log it months later and just have this buff, or
or you do it during those weeks, and then you're more powerful than you could be on the weeks where there's not like a holiday buff. Do you know anything about this, Dorky?
I don't know. No, I don't know the details, but yeah, I did see screenshots of some Chinese group with 4 players timing a like 17 Grimatul or something with like 20 something minutes left.
Oh,
okay, yeah.
Like, clearly something was up.
That's kind of like what the Torghast powers.
The Torghast buffs, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, some other kind of bug.
Awesome, yeah. Okay.
How long? I have a question for you guys. What do you think the likelihood is ever of, with like an ever increasing amount of things we're doing and splits we're doing and characters we have? While we were on the topic of the race world first, what do you think the likelihood is that a raid could end in the first reset, so there's no second reset in a simultaneous release?
In a simultaneous, like heroic and mythic, same time?
Yeah. So basically every tier in the last couple years except for Nerebar Palace.
Didn't that happen with Sarkareth?
That did happen with Sarkareth, so you'd have to factor that in. I think I'd probably make the argument on Sarkareth that us having like 5 or 6 relatively higher eye level in the first week because of the crest system is a huge reason why that raid got stomped.
I think with the Sarkareth tuning though, like, I don't know, I feel like if you guys had progged that boss for another 8 hours, you would have been able to find another 10% damage or something, 5% of the boss's health, something like that.
I think if we had 5 less eye level, we wouldn't have been on that boss.
Maybe, yeah, I guess that would be the problem.
Yeah. We had an absolutely we've had relatively the same eye level compared to what drops for every raid for a long time, and then recently it got higher with Crest, and then it got lower after Sarkareth. But the Sarkareth one was again like 5 to 6 item levels higher, that's the amount of power is insane difference between those two things.
So like the question is like, what is the % chance that Gallywix dies in the first reset?
Yeah, what do you think?
I want to guess like low double digits, like 15%, 20%, something like that.
How many days of splits do you think we're doing?
I mean, it depends on how.
What's normal?
I would guess like 3.5, 4.
So we just got done last year doing an entire 7 days of splits because we had a heroic week and we already have all
Right.
the characters for that. So how many? And keep in mind, a race has never it has never happened where we have gone down in the amount of chores and things we're doing for gearing in a raid.
But presumably you would going from a heroic week tier to a non-heroic week tier, right? Like you're not gonna. Are you gonna run all 18 of those characters back, or however many you have? Like
We could.
that's. Well, it seems like it's less value though, right? Like the opportunity cost is higher. Every extra split you run is 2 less hours of mythic progression,
Yeah.
right? So if the mythic is tuned, if the pendulum has swung back on the kind of easy side, and it's possible to kill it week 1, and you guys do 10 extra splits, and Echo goes in and goes mythic, right? Like, aren't you gonna lose?
That's actually super funny. So the reality is Echo would never go back in because Echo,
Right.
like the only mistake
always
that
do
can
more
happen
splits.
is we can go in too early because they're always going to do as much as you possibly can. It would be more something like the raid is undertuned and literally a guild like ID or something would win. Because you are never like going to go in for neither one of our guilds are going to go in first unless you are absolutely done and have to. Because you
And I guess
can't lose it.
for ID to like kill it, it would have to be like almost Xavius levels of not quite. I mean, ID is a very good guild, but for them to kind of like surprise kill it while everybody's still doing splits, it would have to be kind of close to that level of.
I mean,
tuning miss.
there's precedent to believe that this tier will be not hard.
Yeah.
So in like WoW's history, when you have a hard raid, when you have 2 hard raids, when raids are getting too hard and the public backlash is strong like it is now, which maybe some people feel like this is like a unique moment. This has happened multiple times before. The raids after that are never, oh, we're now at a new level of difficult. The raids are going to be super hard now. There's always a bounce back. And we just saw 2 of the hardest raids ever back to back. There's certainly, now that could maybe not repeat itself. Maybe raids are just crazy hard now. But historically, they have always bounced back from that. So there's some precedent to think it'd be easier. So we did like 3 full days of splits last time. Let's even say worst case scenario, it's like 3.5, 4 this time. How many days of progression do you even have to clear all of Mythic then?
Then you'd have 3, right? Or 3.5.
Most end bosses, if they're even killable in week 1, would take that alone, right?
Well, there are some that you could do in 1.5. Sarkareth type things, or those die pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. So you said 15%. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dorky?
I would be surprised if we see first week kill. I don't know. I like large part of me feels like if bosses are going down too quickly, Blizzard will just immediately try to buff one of their quote unquote walls. Like say you kill the 5th boss too quickly, they'll probably try to buff the 6th or even like 7th boss.
Yeah, there's not a lot of bosses in there where you could gauge pure single target. And I think it's also really hard for Blizzard to tell too, because they don't ever know when we're at our full power, right? Like if we're killing the 4th or 5th boss, we probably haven't sent any upgrades yet. So they don't know what our power is. And then even after we send our upgrades, maybe to kill something like One-Armed Bandit, we have 15 to 20 players who haven't even done Mythic Plus to cap out their crests to get multiple upgrades yet. So then like there's multiple tiers of power and we don't reach them until like near the end of the week. So like there's no specific point where Blizzard's like, all right, this is their single target. You just never know. And then you also never know exactly how much we can optimize. Like, Ansurek is a good example of that, right? Nexus Princess was a good example of that. So I think the idea of that, Dorky, it's really hard to do that.
It's also class tune is also really weird at the moment.
Right, which the more kind of all over the place class tuning is, the bigger an edge that good guilds will have on like being able to exploit that, right? I think there's a decent chance that the directive kind of on raid difficulty this tier is like, okay, let's make sure if we miss on the side of too easy rather than too hard. I don't think it's like especially during the Race to World First, I think there is a very good chance that they will not want it to die in the first week, or they'll not want it to die too easily in the first week. But I think 15% is fair. Like, that's pretty unlikely. You could be surprised at something that had a 15% chance of happening, and it does, right? I don't know. I just feel like it's not. Again, if you look back over history, right, the last 5 years of Races to World First, the amount of week 1 clears, it's not been 0. It's been a few, right? It's Sarkarath, Jaina, Cahoon, right? Those, I guess, are those just the only ones? Sylvanas, yeah. There's been a few. Max, you're muted.
Dude, when was the last time there was a mythic only phase?
Nazoth, right?
A little later.
Oh, Jailer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jailer was that in 2021?
2022, I believe, right? Early 2022?
No, because
yeah.
Nathrius was December in 2019. So it would have been
March 2022.
It was 2022 because it was right after the Ukraine war started. I remember because I was in Europe as that was happening.
Yeah, Shadowlands was so long.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's been almost 3 years since
a mythic phase.
Since the mythic phase. Yeah. So I wonder if there's any like tinfoil, because like, have you seen the way that the fight is kind of set up on mythic?
Yeah, it's like a little. I have.
So it's really hard to tell, and it seems kind of incomplete. But like in heroic, there's like 3 defined phases, and then it seems like in mythic it just starts in P3.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Gul'dan mythic,
Exactly.
where it like the heroic start of the fight, it just kind of does all that at once at the start of the fight, and maybe. But I don't know. I'll be honest. Like
Gul'dan did P2 and P3 of heroic. It just skipped P1. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's room for a mythic phase there. It could be a mythic phase, which could mean a longer than expected race, right? Like that would usually mean the boss takes longer, or it could be an easier, right? Like it could be like a 7-minute 30 fight like Sarkarath. Although even Sarkarath had 3 phases, so
yeah. Well, mythic, I think a mythic only phase would be interesting because we've never done a mythic only phase in the era of like guilds like black out their streams and turn their streams off.
True. Oh,
like,
that would
like what do you
suck.
That sounds so bad, but like I don't think streams would come off, but like because like if you're at a mythic only phase, you're near the end of the fight, so they can't do it.
And also, there's a lot of danger of the boss just randomly dying. Mythic only phases tend to be easy, like
easier. Yeah, it's already at the end of a very hard boss usually, so it's like it's more about just like putting the pieces together. But like it's so strat reliant that like giving that away. Yeah, so you can't, because it's at the end of a mythic fight, you can't really not stream it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you would if it was near the end of your day. You definitely would.
But you would have streamed the pull getting there, and then like that already is giving
give away
so much
most
of the
info.
information. Yeah, what you wouldn't want to do is like get there at 10 p.m., see it, stream the seeing it, talk about it for an hour, get there, execute a good strat on it, and then go to bed. That's like literally the worst thing you could ever do. Right, you'd want to like cook up the thing and try it in the morning, so you don't give them something ready made to wake up with. But that's just one of the weird race things.
Yeah.
Would you guys ever kill a boss off stream?
Yes.
Yeah, Council of Blood.
Council of Blood.
That'd be crazy. Well, no, I mean like an end boss.
Oh, an end
boss. No,
that would be a disaster.
That would be a huge controversy. Honestly, Council of Blood was almost a huge controversy because we were just basically gonna like make sure that the fight still worked at the end of our raid day. It was at the end of our raid day. We're like, let's just spend an hour on this. We think it's gonna be hard. It turns out it was very easy. And also, we didn't want to show our Dark Recital strat. So like, if you remember Dark Recital, like if you get it, you move like right and run around the boss in a circle. If you don't, you move left. That was like our whole plan. And we're like, we can't show them this. And they didn't find it out. So us not streaming that kill, like they spent hours not doing that and YOLOing Dark Recital, and they were just dying to it. So I think the decision to do it was correct, but we did kill it, and only one person was randomly had their shadow play on. It was Wolf Disco, recent, just came back to the guild as well. He did it, but could you imagine if we killed that boss and then didn't have a VOD? We were very close. If someone didn't press whatever the shadow play key is in time, like we would not have had a VOD of us killing that boss, and that was almost a big controversy. The reason it's funny that it was him is he randomly takes a gateway backwards in that video. Like, so like in a regularly well cut boss video, you'd probably cut out the part where the raider takes a gateway in the wrong direction. But because he's the only POV, you just have to look at him like slowly walk back towards the boss, and it's so good.
Hell yeah.
Anyways, I'm excited. That's enough for raid stuff though. The raid looks very cool. You guys will enjoy it if you guys are listening to this. I actually think I hope the raid like plays out well. I hope they don't have any more. Like we've just had so many like controversies in a row. You know, like Aberrus was Skarn. Impossible to get past the Skarn thing is a huge blunder on Blizzard's part. Tindril, way too hard, and certainly way too hard by the time you got to it. Last year, Brood Twister was the same thing, just earlier in the raid. I hope that they can find a way to not have that happen. I'm a little skeptical with 8 bosses. There's just not really enough bosses to properly jump the difficulty curve from what a first boss and a last boss is. But hey, the raid looks fucking cool. It like, and I genuinely mean look, like visually. It visually is the whole patch visually is just fucking cool. So I hope you guys play. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, speaking of the whole erring on the side of making things easier, M Plus has taken a pretty drastic turn. At least, what I've noticed so far from testing the dungeons. They've gone heavily nerfed. It seems like they've gone nuclear approach.
Mm-hmm.
People have been complaining about dungeons feeling overly complicated, or like, there's too much damage going out for the longest time. And now it's like they've taken the complete opposite approach. Like normally M Plus, they would release it in the state of it being a little bit overtuned. Sort of like, Ruby Life Pools when it first comes out, and Azure Vault, and like all these other dungeons. They definitely err on the side of making it hard so that once players figure it out, they can assess where the pain points are and just like, nerf 1 or 2 months into the patch. But that has always left players feeling really bad. It's been like such a running theme where the players are just like, oh, well, I mean, here comes more overtuned dungeons, and we just have to wait a month or 2 until we can actually play them. But this time around, it seems like they've just nuked these dungeons on PTR. And the dungeons are not even out yet. I've noticed a lot of these dungeons are just so much easier. I mean, it's also kind of inconsistent, so I can't necessarily say if this is like what Blizzard intends. But some dungeons, you're straight up taking no damage from things that would like obviously kill you in the past. And some dungeons, you still take that damage where you're just like dead if you don't press a button. So I'm not like too sure what's going on there. I'm not sure if it's their new approach or if it's just they fucked up somewhere.
Yeah, I haven't been doing PTR keys, but I've been reading the patch notes, and they've definitely been like every week it's like 5 different dungeons are having 10 different patch notes that are like, reduce the damage of this ability by 80%, reduce the cast speed of this ability by like 100% or whatever, like all these big nerfs coming in. They turned off also the mind controlling the squirrels tech in that's in big. Workshop, which I'm a big fan of that. I always think it's really stupid whenever there's like, you do one thing with the dungeon and it does like zillions of DPS, something like that. Yeah, especially if it's like you have to play a priest. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I think it's like, I like seeing them do this to the dungeons. I think that they're going to be more fun. Like, it's not like they won't be hard. Obviously, they're going to be much easier at any given key level, right? Like, especially with all the other changes they've made to key level scaling, doing a +7 next season is going to be half as hard as doing a +7 was this season, which I think is a good thing. But for players that are like pushing, well, because they nerfed the scaling by a bunch as well, and the base level of the dungeons is getting easier, and like the Challenger's Peril won't be there and stuff. So I think
is that true?
Yeah.
I swear I remember looking at a chart or some graph where it's like the scaling is roughly the same until you get to the 12 mark, the jump between 11 to 12. And then it just like becomes a lot more steady rather than
somewhat different. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe if you can find, because I swear I remember looking at this, but I'm not certain on this.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be, because they changed it to be like 7% per level instead of 10%, which it's interesting. I Google search like scale, and there's like just 10 different times they've changed scaling in M Plus and different graphs from it. So
yeah,
it's okay. It's 7% per level instead of 10% per level. So a Mythic 7 is gonna be plus 50% health and damage instead of plus like 80. That seems quite a bit less. Like, if you put it on a graph with the big scale, it'll look small compared to the high-end keys, but relatively, it's still a big difference.
What's the punish for this? What is the this all backfires on Blizzard next patch? What's the bad thing?
Well, okay, so in M plus, like I guess the bad thing is people feel like the keys are maybe too easy,
That's
and
crazy.
the farm keys that you get to you push to the highest level that you care about for rewards too easily, and there's no challenge. I don't know. I mean, again,
It
it sounds
sounds
kind of
crazy because
it
like
doesn't sound like something people would ever complain about.
yeah,
It's the kind of
because
thing where
yeah.
even if that is actually the problem, people would never describe that problem. They'd be like, I'm bored, right? Like that's what that would sound like, is I'm bored, I quit. You know, they would never
Yeah.
actually cite that as a problem if they were
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about it.
exactly. You'd tell by their
Yeah,
actions of not playing, but they
yeah,
would never complain. Yeah, see, that's why I think it's kind of fascinating Blizzard's doing this, because this is a big departure from this. 'Cause I remember asking you, Dorky, it's like, oh, like the new dungeons feels like that. It's a huge departure, but like, and you're like, I wonder if the rest of the key set will feel like they're doing that, and they definitely are, right? Like they're just routinely doing it to the whole key set, and that is, I think, terrifying for Blizzard. I bet they're scared of this, and the reason why is they can't fix it if it's bad.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Well, once you go down that path, you
you
can't
can't buff.
just
You
revert
can't.
it.
Yeah,
yeah.
like the if
You can't mid-season.
you want
You
to
could
see
next season.
if you want to see
Yeah.
players get mad. There's very few examples of bosses being made harder or things being made harder, and they've all been extremely negative. Think Skarn. There's more involved in Skarn, but the biggest problem was that boss was made harder than it was previously, and that was the source of most of the frustration. Like if a Mythic Plus key is like, oh, there's actually too little damage here, even if they made a buff that didn't actually ruin your gameplay at all, they would just be the response to a dungeon being buffed would just be so negative. And
Yeah.
I think it's the right play though. I mean, we've been kind of saying this for a while, where clearly the biggest burden is on the people who find the keys that you need to do for loot very challenging, and they feel like it's too hard. That's probably the biggest group of people and the most common complaint. But like the thing is Mythic Plus keys scale infinitely. So if things are just too easy, then eventually you can make them too hard, right? Or even if you can, we've always complained, high key players have complained that you reach that point of the key is killing us and we can't survive far before you hit the can we do enough damage to time this key thing. So them nerfing damage by default makes it more likely that you are able to come on the other side of that, where you're actually usually just struggling to even do the damage in time rather than feeling like everything's going to kill you. And I think that could breathe new life into high keys as well. That sounds really fun to me. Like that aspect. If high keys were like that, that sounds so much more fun than just like make sure you live. All the things that are killing you. The boss is screaming every 20 seconds and you just need something to not get one shot. That's bad.
Yeah, I from my PTR testing so far, the M plus dungeons are significantly more fun. I don't know if this is gonna be the same for everyone out there, but like I'm telling you guys who are listening, I know there's been a lot of people who have been dooming on season 2 dungeons. A lot of people are saying like, "Oh, this is gonna be the worst dungeon set ever," yada yada yada. But like, it's crazy. Like these dungeons are so much better. I don't know if it's because of the tuning or just because of like how they've been designing them. But it's you can actually do big pulls again. You can actually not worry about constant kick rotations on every single pack. It's a huge departure from season 1 and even like maybe season 4 of Dragonflight. But yeah, so there's this graph here that Zorthis made.
Are you gonna
According
share?
to this, yeah, one of you guys share it.
Okay, I'll share. I'll share it. Yeah.
Yeah, so according to this, scaling is going to be slightly harder up to a 9. I mean, that's not accounting for Challenger's Peril and whatever else
Yeah.
changes they've made. So it's not like technically harder, but in terms of just like straight up
So
how the dungeons are scaled, it's
yeah,
definitely harder.
the assertion here is that M zeros are scaled 25% higher, which means that it's like a baseline difficulty. But I feel like they scale up M zeros every season. Like that's always something that happens because it's a new season and gear is going up.
I mean, even if you take this graph at face value, this won't even matter, right? Like what? Oh, someone who's doing a 4, it seems slightly harder, but also they're making the dungeons a lot easier. So I think it's more like the numbers. There are numbers that people really care about. The first number where you can get Gilded Crest, which is a 7, I think, right? And
I think so. Yeah.
and the number where you get your max vault edition plus the portals, which is a 10. And a 10 is slightly easier, and a 7 is incomprehensibly a little hard, like so small of a difference.
I think that they just scale up M zeros every season as well. So I think this is like because like this isn't factoring in we're getting 39 new item levels.
So right.
Right?
Actually,
Like,
they do this every time because they have to keep up with the current gear,
Yeah,
so you don't just
right.
smoke
Like
them.
a +2 is going to be harder, but we're going to have more gear that counteracts that, and then the scaling makes it easier. That's my understanding of what's going on here. But Dorky, you said that you think this
Well,
is maybe
yeah.
more scaling than they usually do, or something, or like
Yeah.
in
So
addition to that.
in my experience playing PTR, this is the first time they've ever scaled us up to max item level on PTR.
Hmm.
They've never ever before allowed us to test these dungeons at max item level. They'll normally set us at like, say, max heroic
Wait, what?
track item level.
Wait, you were at like
Yeah.
Giga Abyss eye level?
Yeah,
for
no,
Mythic
yeah.
Plus?
Right now we're straight up max item level. We
Dude,
are
it's so funny.
678.
Raid
And
testing is
we've
the
never
opposite.
tested like this before.
We're testing with
Well, I mean,
actually dog shit gear in raid testing for what we're on.
yeah. I mean, for raid, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, you know, if you want to have kind of like a baseline of what to expect. But yeah, this is the first time we've ever had max item level testing in M+, and we're only doing like around 15s right now, which is a pretty damn low key compared to normal. No, you know, I mean, like season 1. Like season 1 at max item level, we're doing 18s and 20s in TGP, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now granted, this is like we're just playing PTR. Like we could probably push that to an 18 and 19 as well. But going by that key level, I would assume that it's scaled more than usual.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's always like under the hood. I see these posts where it's like, oh, the K value has changed or whatever, all these different things. I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, I'm not smart enough to really like, or I'm not. I guess I don't keep like all that much track of what the usual per season increase of all these different things is, but I think like the relative scaling between the key levels is going to be gentler. That's just provably true, where it's like it's a smaller jump to go from a 2 to a 3 and a 3 to a 4. Although I guess 3 to 4 is going to add an affix, which it didn't used to, but the curve is gentler at the start and then obviously steeper at the high end. I don't know. I guess the other big risk with this is just that the difficulty lands in a spot that is actually less fun for people. Like if it turns out that we were wrong and people do prefer getting one shot to be the difficulty as compared to like needing to do a bunch of damage.
No, there's no way.
Yeah, again, like that doesn't sound realistic, but that would be another case where it's like, you know, if it was a you think you do but you don't type situation.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely people who prefer that because I have seen people who have been positive about season 1 dungeons, but I mean, the numbers kind of show, right? Like M+ has never done so poorly in a season 1, like a beginning of an expansion patch. So like the people have definitely not been having a good time with M+ this season.
Yeah, and I think that sort of is shown by how much Blizzard is changing all these things, right? Like,
yeah,
they are coming in and giga buffing M+ rewards and like giga nerfing M+ difficulty, and like you wouldn't do either, but definitely not both of those things if you weren't looking at it and like, okay, we got to fix this, right? Like this is a problem. So yeah, I think definitely I don't know. I'm optimistic. I'm excited about M+ next season. I think it looks a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's actually huge.
In other content, Theun made one of his, videos that he makes every so often about Powercreep in WoW, which Max, I know you already have a reaction video / stream on that, but it was kind of interesting one. I think it's sort of beating the same drum that a lot of us have been about the game, the amount of stuff getting added offensively and defensively and stuff to the game. But any takes anybody has on that one?
I mean,
it is actually so true though. Oh, you go ahead.
I mean, I just made a video about it, so I mean, my thoughts are there. You should give yours.
What is your quick TLDR?
Well, I mean, it's just an argument I've heard before. I guess he labeled it as kind of power creep instead of just however gave it a term instead of like what we usually always say about it. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems it seems like we're not going. The reason it doesn't seem like we're going back. I don't think you can, at least with the new talent trees. There's no way to like put the genie back in the bottle, It's like here. Buttons have a million interactions. By dumbing it down, you could definitely I think I remember you mentioning this about JB. You were like, I used to watch JB play Resto Druid, and you kind of really understood what he was doing because it was just like kind of rejuve, wild growth, and the management
Yeah.
of that within your party was what you used to keep people alive. And now, like, those spells on their own have so little impact because of all the interactions that everything has, to where each individual button press feels less impactful, or if it does, it's because of like 10 things that happen. That's also really hard to understand, I think, for newer players, or like changing specs, like the thing he does at the beginning of the video is he installs this add-on that simply just on your tooltips, it shows you the interaction that spell has with other talents you have. And like it's renewing mist, and there's just like 15 things on there because of how many things renewing mist interacts with. But because of that, renewing mist has to be bad. It can't on its own just heal you very much, because it's just there's too many things happening with it and the complicated elements that adds to the game. And it's more healing centric, and we've talked about this. Take a drink, PoddyC drinking game every time we talk about defensives being too powerful and the need for pruning and stuff like that. But this is just kind of more along the lines of that. It's just another argument pointing out that this has changed a lot.
I don't think it actually applies to only healing. It applies to all
everyone,
aspects
yeah,
of the
yeah.
game. Yeah. I mean, Benruki's made really good videos about this way back in, it might even be Shadowlands, where he explains how, in order to do damage to someone, it's not just pressing Frostbolt. Like, Frostbolt on its own does literally piss. You have to have, like, this proc and this tier set and, this build up for your Frostbolt to actually hit hard. And, I mean, it's like Pyroblast, right? Like, Pyroblast is probably the best example. A Palm Pyroblast back in, like, the good old days, that shit used to just, like, do big damage. But now, a Pyroblast on its own does complete piss.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole combination of buttons you press that enable you to do damage. And I'm
yeah,
pretty
it's
sure
like stacking multipliers, right? Like if you actually look at it as like this ability does like so little damage, then it goes 30% more from this, and 100% more from this, and 20% more from this, and it's like if you don't have all of those, it does no damage.
Yeah, I remember now during our podcast episode with him as a guest, he talked about how like doing damage just felt better when he was like playing Wrath or whatever the hell he was playing at the time, and he couldn't like really explain why, but it was kind of like along the same lines of this whole argument that we're having too. And Dratnos, I know you're also a fan of the old talent tree, right? Well, I guess it's not really old.
Sort
but
of,
like
yeah. Like I think that the framework of the old talent, like the mop era talents, was actually very workable. It's just they never actually tried to make it so that the talents were balanced against each other in the same row. Like they whereas with the new talent system, they've clearly been making much more of an effort to do stuff with it. But I do think that that old system was like it wasn't the system's fault. It was the fact that they weren't like
it was easier to balance, right? Because like you could put things on a row, and you're like, man, there's this crazy ability, Breath of Syndergosa, and we can put two other things on this thing that you should never have at the same time.
Right, exactly. There were DPS losses. There was a Warlock row where it was like -4% DPS, -2% DPS, or +10% DPS, and that just stayed that way forever.
Yeah, and that was the
like,
issue, but it wasn't like well made.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't open Pandora's box. I feel like they opened Pandora's box when they created the talent trees, because they had to put everything on there, and because you could kind of get multiple combinations of things you didn't have before. It just created an endless web of tuning nightmares and class design problems that you could probably never come back from. Kind of all in the effort of making the leveling experience make more sense. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
It looks like classic talent trees, kind of.
I think that like it being iconically World of Warcrafty is a big part of the upside of it, right? Like you look at those talent trees and you're like, talents.
Yeah.
That's what I remember from WoW. That's how WoW should be. I do think there's a lot of value in that. But yeah, I agree. I don't actually think that the balance, like I think they have given themselves a harder job of balancing those talent trees that requires a lot more resources than it would have taken if they'd just been like, okay, we're going to try and actually balance these talents. Like we are going to consider it a failure if there are talents with less than 2% pick rate on any of these rows. Which, it seems like they sort of reached that point with the actual talent tree where it's like, we want to make sure that these branches of the tree are all supported and not bad.
I think
the problem with this current tree compared to the classic tree is this tree adds too much. Like, because if you look at classic trees, it's kind of just like, all right, your Blizzard slows more, or you just get like some passive shit, right? But now it's like it adds some major effects to all your different abilities. I was comparing Shadowlands Prop Paladin to current Prop Paladin, and although the base kit plays really similar, the way the class functions and the way you actually try to survive is so much more complicated. There are like 4 or 5 different little buffs that you want to maintain in order to like you keep your tankiness. Like one of them is like when you Avenger Shield, right? You gain up to 10% parry, which is insane. Like that's a lot. That's not something people are actively thinking about, especially not people who are new to Paladin. But that's like something that you're probably gonna want a weak aura for, and that's like something you maintain on top of like readout and like all these other little interactions amongst your abilities. There are so many different passives, even though you have roughly the same amount of buttons from Shadowlands.
Yeah.
I had a viewer suggest to me a like solution. They were like, get rid of all of the stuff in the talent trees that is obvious that you're going to get. If you look at the top of any spec tree, it's just giving you the abilities you've had for many, many years, right? And then it gets into some more interesting stuff. And then I'm just like, that just ends up being mop talent trees, right? Where you just had like your baseline class, then you had like a few important choices you needed to make. And maybe that's what their point was. I like mop talent trees. I want to go back to that or something. I think that kind of misses, and I miss this a lot because I don't level. I've been watching someone level recently, and like it does make sense. I think it makes a lot more sense for as flawed as the WoW leveling system and getting new players into this game is. When you're leveling with these current talent trees, you do get things in a good order, and like the choices kind of make sense. And I think that's part that at least I know I frequently miss when I'm referring to it at just max level. That I think a big reason these were made was for the leveling process. And that, at least for that assumption from the viewer or that solution, I think that would fail in that way because that's kind of
what's wrong with the trainers though? Actually, as a matter of fact, do we even use trainers still in
That's
retail?
a good question.
I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, the trainers is like, it's kind of hard to separate nostalgia because I remember when I'm leveling for the first time, when you went to go visit the trainer and see what shit lit up that you could buy, that was like,
that was dopamine.
Crazy dopamine.
Yeah, that was big dopamine.
Yeah, so maybe they were trying to like streamline that, and I don't know if going to the trainer was cool or if like opening your talent tree gives you the same feeling now. I don't know.
Especially given the faster pace of leveling, if you had to visit the trainer like every 30 minutes because you've leveled up 3 times, I feel like that would be a lot less.
I mean, it's friction,
like,
but I feel like it's good friction personally.
Yeah, but it's also like it's the kind of thing where like the very most low information players are like not going to know about it unless you air horn them and like put like 10 notifications on their screen that's like you have to go visit a trainer or else your guy doesn't work. So I think that was a problem that they actually had with it, was that like some set of the player base just like was walking around with wing clip only as a hunter for first 30 levels, wondering why they couldn't kill anything.
It is actually funny. It reminds me of classic hardcore. So
yeah,
there's this girl streamer who was playing with Trill. She was just like tagging along with Trill, and she went like 10 levels or something without spending a single talent point. And that's kind of like mind blowing in classic.
But it's not
very easy to do those sorts of things if you don't like know that you're supposed to.
Have you guys witnessed someone playing WoW for the first time that has had zero experience with the game recently?
Yeah, it's like crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane how many things you just know as normal that are totally not intuitive, and the game doesn't really tell you. It's
no other game is such a like, or no other modern game. Like if you just buy a game on Steam that's just come out, you are going to get such a higher percentage of what's going on than when you first start playing WoW retail. Like,
oh yeah,
it's a huge problem for WoW retail, and every expansion they like try and make it better, but it's tough. It's a huge problem. In other news as well, you guys remember we had that discussion about PoE1 last week?
Yes.
Turns out they based on after everybody cried, they're doing like a special event, and it's actually really sick. There's going to be like they're making like a bunch of like temporary classes that are just all new kind of weird classes that are all like they're niche and themed around something different and low dev time, but It looks really cool.
It's like season 4 for PoE.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
sort, but it's like a much higher effort season 4 than it's kind of like a season of discovery type effort, even maybe. I'm
That
not
sounds
sure.
like
It's
more than a few. I just meant season 4 in the fact that like 3 to 5 people made it. The Shadowlands
yeah,
one.
yeah,
it's
100%.
they are
something
like
small.
it's limited effort, but it looks like it's going to be a very high return on investment for them. So I'm
It
pretty
was
excited about
crazy too because the whole PoE1 community went complete 180. They were very like, wait, GGG is the best gaming company ever.
I mean, they
like,
did something good. I mean, that they deserved it in that way, right? Like they're getting shit on, and they're like, all right, you guys are all mad. Here, we're gonna give you something cool. Naturally, your response to that is gonna be nice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
yeah,
Which is
it
good,
does kind
right?
of remind me of the whole when remember when Blizzard said they weren't gonna do any M plus changes coming
Yeah.
into this expansion.
Oh yeah, the complete
kinda similar
180.
to that.
We were just waiting for a post, and then they were just like, "Yeah, I don't know, we'll do some Mythic Plus stuff." Everyone's mad. Just kidding. Here's all the. We're gonna completely revamp this mode.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
there is one really important thing I need to mention too, dude. Remember how last week I was talking about how tank damage is terrible?
Yeah.
It is so fucking bad. Hold on, let's see if we can pull this up.
Oh, you have stats?
Not stats. It's just me doing some PTR dungeons.
well, Blake,
Dude, this
self-promo.
damage
Yeah, self
is
promo. That's okay.
so fucking bad. Like it's actually insane. It's been a discussion on my stream for a hot minute because tank players obviously they're not happy with the whole
let's
situation.
see.
Like this
At
damage is not real.
At this exact time, is this a boss?
Yeah, you can see a single target on the bottom.
Bottom.
Well, I guess
not the
right,
bottom.
dude,
left window.
Your
yeah.
details are not big enough, man. You're on PTR.
Oh
You gotta
my
get
God.
big
That's true.
details going.
Yeah, the left is single target and the right is overall.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, that's just significantly less than.
It's so bad. Yeah. Well, I mean, but like the worst part is threat is not an issue because they buffed threat. So it's like there's been arguments going on. People are saying like does it even matter if tanks don't do damage? And to a lot of us tank players, it's like, yeah, this shit matters, man. Like it's fun to do damage.
Yeah,
And
you don't need
we
to do
want more
more than a
players to tank.
DPS, but it needs to be more than that. Yeah,
I mean, as long as the threat's fine, I do think there's going to be a lot of people. As long as the threat's fine, are gonna be fine with it. I think.
Yeah, the thing is and I knew this especially when I tanked for a long time, is I felt like every single time they nerfed, they buffed threat due to tank threat issues. The issue was tank damage falling off and
Right.
not scaling well, and they do a band-aid by fixing threat, which is better than nothing, but it's not identifying the main problem at hand. It's kind of like how for those many years they had to keep buffing Windwalker at the end of every single patch because they just didn't scale with their secondaries, and finally in this expansion they made their haste and mastery good, and now that's just something you don't have to think about anymore. It's the same thing. When you're nerfing tank threat, usually the underlying issue is that tanks just aren't doing enough damage, and because there isn't an exact amount that they should be doing relative to DPS, like DPS, there's like a number they form around that, like that's what you should be doing and you want to be really close to that number. But for tanks and healers, there's no number. It's somewhere in between like 100% of a DPS's damage and like 30%. And kind of everything in between has happened over the history of WoW. And like what is actually correct, who knows? But yeah, what you just showed is insane. It's actually crazy. It's that low.
I'm pretty sure it's the lowest it's ever been, and it's probably due to like the tier set being complete dog water for tanks and the difference between DPS damage and tank damage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
historically,
like
tank damage scales pretty badly over an expansion as well, right? Like it does just get kind of worse and worse if they don't do something.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of arguments for like, oh, we don't need tanks to do damage. Like they're called tanks for a reason. They have that shield role next to they have the shield icon next to their role. So it's like a lot of the Holy Trinity players that feel this way, but I don't know, man. Like even looking back in Classic, like Classic Warriors actually did a lot of damage, or like Kata tanks, like Kata Bloody Case. I remember doing a ton of damage.
I think you could ignore
So I don't know if I
most
buy
of
this
that
argument.
feedback. And the reason why is all of that feedback is coming exclusively from players who don't tank.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no way a tank is
Yeah,
like,
100%.
nah, it's okay, we're doing like way less damage than we should. No, that's not the answer. The other people are just like, oh, it's not a big deal, bro. You'll be fine. Which is like, That doesn't affect them negatively. So of course they don't care.
I mean, it's insane too, because they're the ones who are looking for a tank in LFG. So you would think that like, oh, maybe make tanking fun so that more players tank. But yeah, there's just a lot of DPS and healers that don't like it that tanks are able to do a lot of damage.
Yeah, I understand that. Like, the problem is it's very hard to get tank damage to a spot where tank damage is good, and also good tanks aren't like embarrassing mediocre DPS on the meters, which people hate, right? Like the DPS players hate it when that happens. It's like it's almost impossible. There's basically no way you have to pick one of those bad things, right? Either tanks have to be doing low damage, or DPS have to be losing to tanks sometimes, and they really hate that. But
I mean, is that really a problem though?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are on the side of like that. They should just have that happen sometimes. But then the DPS players complain.
Fucking DPS players.
Yeah. All right. This week we have a Patreon question as well, like we do every week. This week's one comes from Hans, and it says, "So this is a story between drama, life advice, and question. I feel like for anybody who likes drama and life advice, those are some bonus Patreon contents that we do. Yeah, we had a really good one, I think, last week or the week before as well. So if you're ever just 1 month,
we need to follow up to that.
Yeah. Okay, but this one comes from Hans. It says, "We killed Queen Ansarak on January 26th, and following that, we had a mass exodus of players. Around 9 players left the guild. Some left to play with better guilds that cleared sooner and more efficiently, around world rank 500 to 600. Some even left for Hall of Fame guilds, and some left because they had changes in their life and couldn't commit to 3 raid nights.
All normal.
With those 9 players, basically all my friends left. I understand every reasoning why they left, and I'm not mad at them. But what I am mad about is how the other players of the guild handled the situation. While I'm really devastated and frankly really, really sad, the other players can't even be bothered to reply to their goodbye messages in Discord. It feels like leadership didn't lose humans they enjoyed playing with, but only machines that need to be replaced to keep the guild afloat, which is of course understandable. Consequently, I now can't quite relate to anyone in the guild anymore. My question is if you've ever had this happen in one of your guilds and felt the same, and if yes, how you managed to overcome the sadness following it."
I'm not gonna lie, this feels like all my guilds.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough as well. Like if you are one of the people staying, these guilds have a lot of churn. It can be hard if every tier you're losing 9 or 10 players, and I think to some respect it's easier if you don't get too attached to them, right? And you do a little bit of like just like, okay, I guess we gotta replace them, move on. I don't know. I mean, I've been, I guess, I'm in a guild that has churned over the course of 5-10 years, probably 100
That's the point
players.
of it dying.
Yeah, like it's a lot of people come in and out. Very few people that I played with 8 years ago or whatever are still in this guild, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it sucks, especially if all your friends left, and then the fact that nobody else, like if you're like the last person in that friend group left in the guild, and now it feels a lot less personal. I mean, that I can't relate to that exactly, but I can understand that. That does suck.
Yeah. The people, I mean, you can't really feel that. Okay, so he's like, it sucks that the officers and everyone in the guild is like not even replying to their goodbye messages. Sometimes you can't really blame them for that, because like, what if like they're really hurt by it? Like, I don't know. I've had someone leave before and they're like, "Goodbye, everybody." And I'm just like, man, I just don't even want to say anything. I'm so bummed out about it. Like, I kind of get that. It's just a reaction. But like when you're in a guild and you're an officer and you're used to people kind of churning through the guild like that, you do learn to desensitize and kind of have people's be guildies and not friends. Because if you actually like genuinely were a friend to everyone that joined the guild and 9 of them were leaving every tier, you would just constantly be going through heartbreak and be very sad, just like you are right now. So it's just maybe just something they've learned to deal with. And raid guilds kind of operate like that a lot of times, right? If you have a lot of churn, people are kind of just machines to keep your raid nights moving sometimes. Not everyone is super close, but sometimes guilds are crazy close, right? It just kind of depends. This has never happened to guilds that I've been in. I like one of the first guilds I joined, US top 20. Like in that era, it wasn't one like my first guild, but it was one of my first guilds. And there was people flying in and out of that guild, and I can kind of relate to just having to get used to new faces every tier, but you just kind of do it. I don't know, you just get used to people, you're just having fun gaming. It's sad to see the good ones go to a better guild. I know that feeling for sure. I've also been that person, and you like feel like you're betraying people even though it's totally the right decision for you, right? I'm surprised you're staying in the guild because it sounds like you're not really even. I don't want to convince you to leave, maybe.
Yeah, nothing's holding you there anymore. Right?
Yeah, but like, there's no, if all of your friends left, and you're like, man, the people here have no empathy for all of my friends that left. Why are you there? Maybe you want to go somewhere with a closer, tight knit place. They killed Queen Ants,
Usually,
right?
yeah, I mean, I feel like if you're doing that, you're usually dropping in guild ranks because I don't know. The way I see it is there's social rating and then there's like ambition rating. Like the higher you go in guild ranks, the more you are ambition rating. Whereas like the lower you go in guild ranks, the more you're going for the whole social rating. And it seems like our patron here is more of a social rater, or maybe just like maybe a little bit
Right,
of
that's
in
now in a
between.
guild that doesn't have
Yeah.
the social part anymore.
Yeah, because I mean, like the higher you go, it's like the less people care about like if someone leaves or not, right? Like I don't know. I feel like in a lot of these higher end guilds, it's like all right, you're kind of like if people leave, then it's like whatever, it is what it is.
Well, actually, one thing is interesting. So this does seem like not a super normal thing. They killed it on January 26th. That was like a little over a week ago. And then he said, following that, we had a mass exodus of players. That means almost half of their rating roster left within 10 days of a tier ending. That is definitely a larger amount than normal churn. That sounds like there was like a disagreement at some level or something, right? He did say that he doesn't disagree with any of their decisions to leave, which is interesting because that's a lot of. Am I wrong in thinking that's a ton of people? That's a lot of people in a short amount of time to leave the guild.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like that's not sustain. If you're losing that many people each tier, that's like pieces level of churn, right? Where your guild.
Yeah, I feel bad about because we were part of the issue there.
Yeah. Presumably that's not what's happening here. I feel like like 4 or 5 is probably the more normal number people to churn out over, and especially to all do it in the week after a kill. Maybe it's because this tier was so hard, right? Like these people have all been sort of planning to leave.
It sounds like they went to better guilds, though.
I guess if they went to better guilds,
it's like
maybe
half
that's
and
the
half, it
feeling,
seems
right? It's
like.
like, oh man, I can't be on prog for 5 months every tier.
I need a
right?
better guild because the raids are too hard now.
Yeah, I need to get done with progression sooner, or
Some of them
I need
can't
to
commit
play
to
with.
this
I don't
algorithm
like
that is
playing
a
for
real
hundreds
thing.
of pulls. Like if I'm playing for hundreds of pulls with somebody who's like inting every pull, like that is super frustrating.
Yeah, but in a
right?
tier that's easier than that, you could get away with it. Like if you're clearing the tier in a reasonable amount of time with people that are not as good, but then the raids get harder, and it's now like, okay, well, it's no longer fun for me to do this with these people. And now after the last 2 raids, they feel like they have to. I think Blizzard would be making a mistake if this raid is anywhere near as difficult as Nerebar Palace and Amir Drasil, personally. And now that's coming from my perspective of that would be bad for me. I want the raid. The harder the raid is, the better a chance we have to win. That's how we feel. And winning is
well,
good.
if it's really easy, then you can get it before the EU servers come up.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't even feel good about that win, and the worst people would just bring it up every day. So that's actually not a good outcome. But like you want the raid to be hard, and you want to we put a lot of time into this. We want to feel like the time we put in was valuable and it was worth it. But even then, I just hope that for the majority of the raiding community, they don't continue ramping after Nerebar Palace. I hope they come back to a level where it's more enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I think guilds like this would feel better too. Speaking of which, can you get cutting edge?
Pretty burnt out from this from this raid too.
I mean, yeah, there's like 3 multiple 100 pull bosses, right, in a row. That's tough, and one of them, I think, Silken Court's like really frustrating, a really frustrating level of difficulty.
Yeah, it's also the kind of difficulty where it's like impossible to sort of get better at it without like you're really bashing your head against the wall unless you have somebody in your guild that can like take organizational responsibility in a way that there are a lot of guilds without somebody who can do that.
Oh, it's a huge raid leader fight. It's
exactly.
one. There are fights where raid leaders are basically just bigwigs timers, and then there are fights when Big Wigs timers could not reasonably ever communicate as much as you need to communicate to have all 20 people be doing something consistently like you do with Silken Court movement. And that is a good example of that.
Also, a lot of prep before going into raid. Like a lot of raid leaders and officers, they're spending all this time outside of their 2 or 3 raid nights, however many raid nights they do, on just like VOD reviewing or looking at logs or like having to go over assignments with certain players. There's just like so much work, and I feel bad for people who put in all this time, and like, you know, if anything ever happens to their guilds.
Yeah. Are there good examples of like boss fights that were super prep and work and fun intensive for Race to World First and like cutting edge guilds or Hall of Fame guilds, and then also ended up being reasonable later down the line? I feel like Rygalon is maybe an example where they succeeded at this, where it was like a sick Giga challenge for, you know, Race to World First, and then it was also one of the easier fights of the last half of that raid for cutting edge guilds.
Halandra's too, but in a different way.
Yeah, well, that was because it got nerfed. Rygalon was like, it didn't really even need to get nerfed. It was one of those
a numbers
things where, like,
thing.
The gear made a lot of the numbers challenges solve themselves, and I think that's like a really good. I think Rygalon is like did this.
Yeah,
perfectly.
Rygalon. If you got through Anduin as like a late cutting edge Sepulchre guild, you smoked the next 2 fights, and then you were on Jailer, and that. Yeah. But like that's not how it was in Race to World First progression. I think they may be onto something like that in this tier. There's a few mechanics this tier that have a failure mechanism to them that when I read them in most other previous raids, that failure mechanism would say something like your whole raid blows up. And now what it says is, instead of that exact text, or basically what that text is saying, it says your raid takes 8 million damage by messing this thing up, which in the Race to World First will kill us. Definitely. That's a wipe. But like with weeks and weeks of gear, that is playable. Like you could live if something like that happens. So they're turning just by tuning the numbers properly, you can turn something into a binary pass fail for the Race World First, which is maybe their intention. And then instead of having to nerf it or remove it for like normal people, you can just have the gear naturally nerf the fight. That's what Rygalon did. Rygalon was released in a numeric place that made it so hard, and the gear nerfed the fight itself. They need to do a better job of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like gear doesn't stop you from having to raid plan the hell out of Silken Court, right? Like
I would argue gear is like heavily irrelevant on Silken Court.
Yeah, like the only thing that's made Silken Court substantially easier. I mean, okay, gear has helped, but not by nearly as much as like
it's helped in thresholds. It's helped in thresholds where you can eventually beat the boss's hard lineups. Very similar to Fyrak, right? When you just no longer had to see a certain amount of seeds, the fight just became infinitely easier. But that never happens in one reset. That's over a long period of time. But like reset to reset, those bosses become significantly easier, and I think those are good. I think guilds, like, it's kind of nice to know you're logging in with new gear and you're going to do way better on the boss you were just fighting, and that has not been true for a while.
Yeah, I think N'Zoth was another tier where you could kind of feel that. There was like the week where your cloak got giga stronger, week 5 or something, and it was like, oh, yep, this.
And now that's built in. Now it's built in. You're getting these buffs, and you know they're going to happen. But like, they're not designing the fights where those buffs actually do anything unless they reach critical thresholds of like, oh, you can skip this thing now. And I guess that's fun for the guilds figuring it out, and fun for the guilds doing it, I guess, because you get to skip that part of the fight. But like, that's not something you feel every week. It's like someone pings in Discord and they're like, hey, we can skip this thing now, and you find out that way. But you should just know by logging in and going into the reset that you're stronger.
Yeah. I hope that they hit that with this race as well, or this tier.
W.
Okay.
Speaking of which,
anybody got any other
guild stuff?
What's up, Dorki?
Yeah. Any classic
Did
update?
You guys.
No, do your thing first, Dorky. You said guild stuff.
Yeah. You guys all saw the guy who sold the lockout, right?
Yes. Oh my god, that
was so good.
What happened?
There was crazy drama. This came out like right after we recorded last week. It was there was a person in a guild that was working on Ansarek, and this person got kicked from the guild, and then they bought an Ansarek carry using the lockout of their guild that had been progging Ansarek.
Oh, that's sinister.
And killed Silken Court 6 weeks ago, and had been extending that lockout for 6 weeks. So then this person buys the lockout, buys a carry using the lockout, and the guild like learns about it after getting saved, and they decide to go through with it anyways over some objections, but not all that strong objections. And then they start DMCA takedowning any videos that have footage of this. Once it turns into like a drama thing, and that's super funny. There's huge drama happening. Reddit, of course, had the really good take that pretty much everybody in a top 100 guild is a scumbag, and this is expected behavior from.
True. True. I mean, that is true.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard to argue with, right? Like,
it is true.
it's
so they're putting some blame on the guild for doing the carry, understanding the circumstances.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder if, because like from our perspective, like if that was the case, like if someone just has a lockout, they could just tell you, yeah, no one's gonna like this like no one else is using this, even if you ask. It's kind of similar to how like Blizzard was banning our players for accepting gold for a run that we were buying with gold, and it turned out that person bought the gold through a gold seller and not through WoW tokens. So they just don't know where that gold's coming from. But like you have no way to, as a guild.
In this case, they did learn about it.
Oh, it's known
after they accepted the lockout, but before they killed the boss. So
yeah, that's definitely it's morally questionable if they're doing sales, because they could just clear. They basically ruined that entire guild's week.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to like re-clear some easy farm bosses.
More than a week, because now that guild has to re-kill Silken Court in theory.
Oh
which
wow!
They've only killed once, and they killed it 6 weeks ago, and they've been extending that lockout, right?
All right, if anyone's a homie, they're giving that guild a Ansrek lockout for sure.
One of my guildies is like murking to try and help them.
I'm like almost positive that can be made to have happen.
Yeah, I think they're getting some help from...
Especially if it was a huge deal, someone will know about it. Bro, the idea of having to like re-kill, dude, that could like kill a guild. Damn, so if that guild knew about that before the lockout...
No, yeah, it was intentional. That guild, that was like a mercenary guild, they said in comms, yo, let's hurry and get this done before they get in here. So it was actually funny as hell.
Ooh, so there was...
That is some...
This has happened in the race before, kinda. Do you guys remember?
I remember your lockout got yoinked in Nighthold for a couple hours.
It wasn't ours.
Oh, somebody Echoes.
It was Method Echo now Method at the time. Fragments accepted some flasks from a viewer.
Yeah.
So a viewer was like, "Here, let me give you some flasks for your raid today." And he was like, "Okay, come meet me over here." And he met him. He like summoned him into the zone, but not into the raid. He was the group leader. He set it to raid, set it to mythic, like changed the group to fragments or something, and then zoned into that mythic lockout. And as soon as you're in someone's mythic lockout, you are like that. You're in there, right? You nothing can remove you from that. And Blizzard, they basically Serenity, which was the guild at the time, they couldn't raid for like 3 hours until they got someone from Blizzard to phase this guy out of their instance. So yeah, a lockout in the race got hijacked.
Wait, what the hell? Intermission from Blizzard?
Yeah, I hope, bro. If that ever happened to us, I would be screaming at Blizzard until they nuked that guy. Get out of here.
Yeah,
I mean, it's fucking Blizzard's fault anyways. Like, it just goes to show how dog shit this mythic lockout system is.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, it would be another thing that wouldn't be a problem if... I remember there was some angst this tier, actually, about people yoinking, like, 4 out of 8 lockouts. I don't know if this actually happened or if it was just a rumor, but to BOE farm with, there was rumors of, like, people yoinking lockouts.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
So, and then, like, so we had, like, an announcement go out that was like, this is going around... Be very careful with accepting groups, right now. Apparently people were trying to like steal lockouts.
It totally makes sense because they nerfed. So the BOE farming, you could get it anywhere instantly, including off of the first boss trash. And then if you killed the first boss, you had like all that trash after that. Then they nerfed that. So then it only spawned after you killed Rashinan, which at the time was very, very difficult. So what it was anyone who was on Rashinan, your raid would end. You guys just killed Rashinan. You're like, hey, I want a BOE farm. Oh, okay, cool. Who in the guild wants to do it? Only 8 people. Okay, I'll put it in the group finder real quick. And now 12 people in the group finder or more have access to your mythic lockout. And maybe some of those people want to do it all night. Maybe they want to do it the next day. Maybe they do it an hour before your next raid. And now you can't raid Brood Twister anymore, which might have been a blessing in disguise because that boss was certainly too hard for you then. And you would have hated your life. But that's not I'm surprised I didn't hear about that because that's totally logical. And I bet that was a widespread issue.
Yeah, I don't think it was like super widespread, but I think it did happen a little bit.
It would be.
Yeah,
It
it was
would have
really
been
an issue,
more.
honestly.
It would have been more widespread if BOEs were sellable on the auction house, but because
Right.
they could only be equipped to your character if they dropped, it was way
It was
less.
limited value.
Limited
'cause you
value,
couldn't-
yeah.
It wasn't just like a gold printer, yeah. Although there were the BOE farm runs where people would go into it just with the intention of selling any BOEs that dropped to somebody else in the run. There were BOE runs that were like that where, because it obviously drops for a certain person and then you could trade it to anybody else in the raid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Dorky, classic drama. Any?
There wasn't really any drama, but the whole MC raid, that was kind of cool. It was cinema.
Some people died, I'm sure.
Yeah, there was
there's
like
a bunch of people died.
Fandy died to like a double auto attack thing from 100 to 0.
Like a double bolt, yeah.
Yeah,
kinda
that which is
crazy.
crazy that could happen. That was funny.
Yeah,
It also-
apparently people were saying it's like 1 in 40 chance multiplied by 1 in 40 chance because, there's 20
Right, it's
players
gonna
and
cast
she
two
just got
bolts at
randomly
two
targeted
random
twice.
players.
Yeah.
But it could pick the same person. Yeah, that's crazy.
Extremely unlikely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the TGP was happening over the weekend, and that led to a lot of. I don't know why this was a take, but like, it was like a Reddit post or something. But I went live on like Tuesday, I think, and people were just like, "Yo, did you see the TGP last weekend? Ha, it was so fucking funny how little viewers they had compared to Classic, bro."
Oh, dude.
Like,
I had it. So
like,
I
why does
was
this matter?
co-streaming the raid. I mean, not the raid,
TGP.
the TGP, right? Yeah. And so I had like 2K-ish viewers, and then some first time chatting message comes into my chat and was like, "Lol, 2K retail viewers, 300,000 classic MC raid viewers,"
Yeah.
and it's like, what are you talking about? First of all, the 2K is just my channel. Like we're not even including Warcraft itself. It's
Where,
We're
such a
only
whole-
had,
where does
like,
the hate come from?
10
Is it in
days
their
up there.
is it in their heart? Like why if you're loving the Classic raid and you're just having a great time, you enjoy it. Where does the part of you start where you're like, you know what? I'm gonna stop enjoying this and let other people know what they're doing is less cool than what I'm watching. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's I think there's also it's one of those areas where there's overlap because there are also a lot of retail players that think WoW esports is stupid or the MDI. Like hating on the MDI is
yeah.
it's a cross discipline that we've got retail players that hate on
Yeah,
the MDI.
this is the
classic
reason
players that
why
hate on the
retail
MDI.
is bad now. It's because
Right.
Blizzard makes the game for the MDI.
Well, but there's also just retail players that are like, I don't care about the MDI and I am preying on its downfall even though I'm a retail player, right? So
Yeah.
Yep.
there's like some handshake between the retail players that
Yeah,
hate the MDI
there's a
and
nice
the classic
meme to be
players.
made there.
Right, exactly. There's some line up there, but I don't know. I mean, it's weird it's a weird dunk on Blizzard to like if you're trying to dunk on Blizzard like, haha, so many people are watching other parts of your game that you're not spending money on, that they're not watching your esports product. It's like,
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't think
hard to
they're
imagine
dunking
anybody at Blizzard being sad about
Yeah.
that, right?
That's a good point. Well, I also
Like the MC raid is a huge dub for Blizzard. It's like the Race to World First, where it's like poggers, right? Like,
Yeah.
look at this. It's a huge event. Well, that's great. It's our game.
Where do you find yourself lost enough that you like cherry pick the times where Classic is popping off versus retail
Right.
and not vice versa? Where like the exact same thing, but the opposite is going to happen in a month with the
During
race.
the race,
And
yeah.
it happens
We should
every
do
single
that.
patch. Where it's like, but the thing is I wonder if Classic streamers see that same thing. Like, do Classic
should-
streamers when the race is happening, they're like, "Lol, dude, Classic is dead." Whenever Classic content isn't out.
We should do like a quote retweet of one of these things in a month where it's like 180,000 people watching the Race to World First and like 2,000 people
Nah.
watching Classic leveling or whatever.
I think we need to have control. That sounds good, but then you're like giving validity to that entire argument by being like by doing that. It's just so annoying.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, obviously it's like
I don't want to hear anyone ever make like, dude, who fucking cares? Who cares?
yeah. Yeah.
I just find it fascinating
Yeah, I
that
mean-
people think that. Like they're just having fun watching something and they're like, I'm gonna go hate on something else.
Yeah.
Like, bro, just watch the stream, man. Have fun. What are you doing?
Yeah.
That's kind of like what I was talking about last week with the whole PoE 1 and PoE 2 community. There's just a whole lot of that going on.
Yeah,
But,
PoE 1 has ever since D4 has come out, there's been this sort of same element of like gleeful reactions whenever something bad happens to D4. where it's like, I don't know, like if you're really having a good time playing your game, you don't just randomly.
It's definitely
like,
a upset in
you have
real
less
life
of a need to shit on other games, right?
behavior.
Yeah.
If you're having if you have like a job of maybe a family or even none of those things, you're single and happy and you're just having a great time. There's just no way your behavior is like I'm gonna hate on everything I see or I'm gonna prey on the downfall of a game that I don't play. There's just no way that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird too because like it went from D4 bad to like unironically PoE 1 players saying PoE 2 bad. Like it's actually crazy.
At least they're calling it how they see it.
Yeah.
I do think that does come from the same spot where it's like something you wanted to enjoy is not doing it for you. Then you hate on, right? Like you don't see them just randomly being like, "Oh yeah, The Sims 4 sucks," right? Because like it's just unrelated to them, right?
Yeah.
Also, The Sims 4 is probably a good game. I don't know. You see, they're doing a big The Sims. There's the 25th anniversary of The Sims, by the way. So happy birthday!
The Sims is just like okay. So have you guys ever played The Sims and just been bored and you're like, I'm gonna like do a little Sims playthrough, and then you end up like cheating a little bit, and then it's like this game is no fun because I just bought the thing that I wanted with cheats, and then like I've done that so many times, and I've like looked into expansion packs that I've never bought before for The Sims, but it is unbelievably expensive. Like train simulator level like microtransactions.
$2,000 to finish the collection type.
No,
things,
it's dude. Train simulator is like tens of thousands of dollars to finish the thing. Like Sims, probably not that much, but it's the same vibe where like they implement like very minor features to a kind of infinitely replayable game, and they're like $60, and it came out in like 2012, and it's like still $60.
Yeah,
dude, we should do a Sim stream. That'd be fucking hype.
Hell yeah. I did a promo stream for The Sims a couple of years ago, I think.
Wait,
like
really?
one of those bounty board. There was
Oh,
a
yeah.
Sims 4
That's
bounty
fun.
board stream. Yeah, it was a good time. All right, I think we've exhausted our World of Warcraft, Path of Exile, The Sims drama content for this week.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next week with another PoddyC.
Yep. Poddy, see you later.
Adios.
Adios.
See you.